What's going on, guys? It is getting spicy in our own backyard. The United States and Venezuela are locked in a dangerous escalation. Naval deployments, tanker seizures, airspace warnings. This is no longer background noise. This is a potential flashpoint that could ripple across the energy markets, affect migration flows, and quite honestly, even your wallet. And here's the part a lot of people are missing. This isn't happening halfway across the world. This isn't the Middle East. This isn't Eastern Europe. This is happening in our own hemisphere, right off of America's doorstep. That makes it different. That makes it urgent. When conflict brews this close to home, the shockwaves don't take months to reach us. They hit fast, they hit hard. So let's talk about the escalation. Here's the facts. U.S. forces struck vessels accused of drug trafficking near Venezuelan waters, and then a major naval buildup followed in the Caribbean. The U.S. seized a Cuba-bound oil tanker off Venezuela's coast. In response, Caracas mobilized defenses, declaring hundreds of their battlefronts ready. So this isn't just saber rattling. These are absolute deliberate moves that raise the risk of confrontation at sea and in the air. And unlike conflicts in the Middle East or Eastern Europe, this is all happening less than 1,500 miles from U.S. shores. That proximity changes everything. Response times, again, the migration flows, and the potential for direct impact on America's civilians. Now, let's break down the players. Obviously, first, we have the United States, and we're there flexing military power, enforcing sanctions, and debating war powers at home. On the surface, it looks like a constitutional tug of war. Congress versus the executive, Democrats versus Republicans. But what's really behind all of these debates that are going on? Now, here's one angle. It's less about principle and just a lot more about politics. Democrats are now raising alarms about war powers, demanding oversight on all this, warning of all of this unchecked authority that's happening. Yet the critics are quick to point out, and not necessarily wrong, that they had little issue when President Obama expanded drone strikes, even when those strikes killed American citizens abroad. So why the sudden concern now? Is it genuine constitutional defense, or is it just about sowing more division, keeping the public polarized, and using Venezuela as the latest stage for partisan theater? The timing and all of that is quite suspicious. Now, escalation in the Caribbean gives both sides a new wedge issue, one that can be spun as a national security, humanitarian concern, or executive outreach, depending on the audience. And if you believe even the deeper conspiracy, this isn't about Venezuela at all. It's about controlling the narrative at home. Every tanker that's seized, every sanction enforced, every debate in Congress becomes just another lever to keep Americans divided, distracted, and debating each other instead of asking the bigger question. And that is, who really benefits from this escalation? So Venezuela, Maduro, he's framing this from his podium as imperial aggression in an effort to rally defenses. Then Cuba, they're being directly impacted by tanker seizures, kind of caught in the middle of this whole thing. So we'll wait and see what their position is when they get a good take on it. Then there are the global buyers. Nations like China, India, they're just quietly buying Venezuelan crude, which is now exposed to U.S. enforcement risks. So this isn't just Washington versus Caracas. It's a web of energy flows, alliances, and rivalries. And because it's happening in the Western Hemisphere, the ripple effects hit closer to home than conflicts in far-off theaters. Now, what this means for you and me. So this isn't an abstract, and here's how it could hit home. First and foremost, on my mind, is energy prices. Let's be honest. Trump has staked much of his legacy on cheap energy. Low gas prices have been a cornerstone of his administration's narrative, but here's the problem. Seized tankers mean tighter oil supply, and tighter supply means higher fuel costs. Now, right behind that comes the battle we're already fighting like crazy, and that is inflation. Rising energy costs don't just hit the pump, they ripple into food, transport, manufacturing, and everyday goods. When oil goes up, we all know that everything else follows right behind, and that puts direct pressure on households across America. So again, all of this directly impacts the Trump administration's foundation. Their secondary goal has been to brand themselves as the administration of cheap gas and affordable living. But here's the twist. You ready? Are you ready for this? The key issue that defined their first term wasn't just energy, it was migration. And escalation in Venezuela could trigger displacement, sending waves of migrants north and just adding to the pressure to the U.S. borders. And that means the administration could suddenly be juggling two crises at once: rising costs at home and rising migration at the border. And here's the part that makes this different, again, from the usual overseas conflicts, and that is proximity risk. Unlike the wars in the Middle East, again, or Eastern Europe, this conflict zone is right in the Caribbean. That means faster spillover, whether in disrupted trade routes, refugee flows, or even cyber and maritime incidents affecting U.S. coastal states. When the flashpoint is this close to home, again, those shockwaves don't take months to arrive. They are going to come at us faster and harder than we've ever experienced before. So just to drive the principle home, preparedness means watching these signals now, not after the shock hits. Now, one of the other important questions is, kind of putting some critical thought into this from where my viewpoint is. There's three paths in which this whole thing could take. The first being just managed coercion through seizures and sanctions, the result being that there is no direct war, but we kind of see how that's playing out. Then we would have the limited clashes, which would just be limited to maritime or border incidents. But with this, there's the very real possibility of generating fatalities, and that just always complicates and escalates things further. Or there is just an utter regional shock, and you have spillover in the Caribbean trade routes, causing a global energy disruption. Each of those scenarios carries risks. Each scenario demands attention. And remember, again, this isn't the Middle East or Asia. This is the Caribbean we're talking about. That proximity means shorter warning times and less buffer for the United States. But now, thinking of critical thought, can we just pause for a moment and ask ourselves, shocker, again, what's this really all about? From the looks of it, like virtually every other conflict in modern history, this is boiling down to it being about energy and about oil. Venezuela sits on some of the largest proven oil reserves in the world. Every tanker seized, every sanction enforced, every naval patrol, it all ties back to controlling energy flows. And here's the kicker. Why now? Maybe it's not just about Venezuela. Maybe it's about the bigger picture. We're living in the dawn of the AI age. Data centers are multiplying, servers are humming, and the demand for electricity is exploding. And AI doesn't run on thin air. It runs on power, and power comes from energy, oil, gas, and the global supply chains that keep them moving. So ask yourself, is this really about drug boats and sanctions, or is it about securing the energy lifeline needed to fuel the next technological revolution? If AI is the new arms race, then oil is the ammunition. And while all that is sinking in, let me know what I'm missing, if there's anything missing there, or if you're spot on, while you're doing all that. Let's quickly touch on communications, because when conflict happens overseas, HF ham radio operators in the US are usually listening, pretty much from a safe distance. But this time again, the theater is right next door. Venezuela, Cuba, the Caribbean, these are all within strong HF propagation ranges for US operators. So what does that mean for us? Firstly, a lot of US citizens will have direct contact and could be talking to people in affected countries in real time if this escalates. And that relates directly to information flow. In a crisis, official channels may go dark. HF becomes a lifeline for uncensored, ground level information. So in the preparedness role of all this, operators in the US could relay humanitarian traffic, monitor signals, and provide situational awareness when the mainstream media lags. But I think with all that, it also does carry some risks, because the government may monitor or restrict transmissions. In conflict zones, radio traffic can be sensitive. Sharing the wrong info could put the wrong people at risk. And because this is happening so close to the US shores, HF propagation is strong and is going to be generally reliable. You're not, going to be straining to catch faint signals from halfway across the globe. You're hearing clear voices from the Caribbean basin. So I'm really curious to get all of your thoughts on all of this, but especially the comms aspect from anyone who routinely monitors HF traffic in the region, especially things like how the maritime net may be affected. Now, if you've been watching these videos, you knew by now I never like to end these videos with a sense of hopelessness. The point isn't fear, it's action. So it's about what you can do right now to position yourself, your team, your family, to just be that much better prepared if things take a turn. So here are the pillars I always come back to, and I want to share them with you. So kind of in my threat assessment of this whole thing, first thing I'll be ready for is having energy readiness. So we know this conflict could directly affect fuel supply. So keeping your reserves topped off, whether that's your vehicle tanks, your backup generators, or just the stored fuel that you have. And don't just fill up. Watch oil price trends. They're often the first signal of disruption. And then beyond that, you're going to have your food and your essentials. Rising energy costs ripple into food, transport, and everyday goods. So, stock your essentials now while you can, while the shelves are stable. Think long-term staples, but also the everyday items that you don't want to be scrambling for when prices spike. Then we just addressed it. There is the communications aspect. In a crisis, information is power. So check your gear. The cold weather has, been across the entire country, and we know cold weather is hard on batteries. So test them, replace them, whatever you got to do, and keep spares. Know your HF bands, know your local nets, and be ready to monitor. If the Caribbean, starts to hum with signals, you'll want to be listening for sure. And then have some financial awareness. Inflation spikes hit fast, so stay diversified, stay liquid, and don't get caught flat-footed, because when energy prices surge, the shockwaves hit your wallet before anything else. And then bringing this back home, we've just been talking about it, the situational awareness aspect. This is one of our pillars. So pay attention, track those migration flows, watch war power debates in Washington, and follow regional news outlets, not just the headlines. So the closer the conflict is to home, again, the faster these impacts are going to arrive. So guys, preparedness, it isn't just about food and fuel. It's about information. It's positioning yourself ahead of the curve and when that Caribbean, starts to hum with information, whether it's signals through the markets or through migration or even through radio chatter, you'll want to be tuned in and ready, because energy is power, power is control, and control is what every conflict is really about. So with that, we'll see you on the next one. Be safe.